This last weekend I competed in Ludum Dare 51, and for this the theme was every 10 seconds. What I did is I made a little game that I call This Metal Heart Still Beats. It features a robot named Ava, and your job is to do some coding for Ava to help them complete some basic tasks. Because I ran out of time, the only task that Ava can do is pick up trash. I originally intended you to help Ava throughout the entire day, like waking up and taking care of themselves and going throughout the day. But I had to cut back on that because the visual scripting system that I made took a little longer than I expected it to. So this is the editor in the engine here. It works all on its own. And so you can see this works here. Close that out. Because what it is it loaded my previous graph to make them. There was some weird transform situations, so when you're in the 1-1 view, everything works just fine. But if you're like this, then it gets really offset for some reason. I'm not sure why. We connect these. The tick event is the main system here, so we'll force a tick. Now we'll see the full game. You can see Ava there just going around. There's a little pop label for the different actions they're doing. And if you can hear that, I cross-faded the music between the scenes as well as doing the fade transition. I used Dialogic to make this little scene here. The story of it, basically. And so now we're in this section. My previous script is here. And if I go over here, I'll see that. We'll do that. And so there's a basic scene. You can see the trash bag, Ava, and some particles, as well as a very, very slowly fading background. And you can see if I have no event nodes, it'll warn that I have an unhandled event tick. And this is scrollable. I can even change how big it is or how big the node graph is. If I want to still see the, if I still want to see the trash bag while I'm doing my nodes, I can do this. And so if we have the tick node, and we have an action move, and you can hear the sound effects for the different node actions. I found that was kind of fun. I wanted some kind of auditory feedback. So -10 here. And then on the next tick, which Ava will tick every 10 seconds, Ava moved -10 steps. And so we can force the tick to make them do it more. And so you can see we had an unhandled event, can interact. Let's give it an event node, can interact. And we're going to interact. And so now we need to move Ava away so that we can approach again and have the event trigger. And we can save this graph here. It also works if you do Control S. Same sound effect either way. We'll force that, and then we'll go back to -10. And so now, when Ava gets close enough, Ava interacted. We have our win sequence. You can either choose next level or go back to the level select, which will be this next level here. I'm just going to go back to the main menu and quit. And so I submitted this actually to the Compo. You can see here. That means I made it in 48 hours. So I had, from my time, Friday at 5 p.m. until Sunday at 5 p.m. It was a pretty good time. I got this working pretty well. I kind of enjoy the little story I made, and I'm really proud of the node graph system. There are some things that I'd want to fix if I was doing it again, but doing it again, I would much rather make it as an add-on for Godot rather than a built-in into a game system, because I think it serves better as a tool for programming on a game engine side versus something that the player interacts with. Some of the feedback I got from some players in Ludum Dare is that it's a little confusing for non-programmers. Um, Another thing is that the position system was a bit confusing. They expected it to be grid-based like many other puzzle games, but it wasn't. And I have the web build running. It's also embedded on the Ludum Dare page. I'm going to mute that. It is embedded on the Ludum Dare page, and it does work. But it is sandboxed, so saving the graphs between play sessions isn't possible. So on itch.io it is. There's also a full screen button. I have the code available. I used the GitHub Actions to automatically build the code every time I pushed it to the main branch, and then it would upload the latest version here on itch.io. And it would embed, it would put out the Mac, Linux, and Windows version, and then the web build, I only had to go in once, the very first time, for the very first build, to label it as the one that should be played on the page. And so then it just worked, and it was great. Except for this. I don't like this, but I've never seen this in Firefox. I think this might be a Waterfox thing. And I've got my screenshots showing off how it works. Another thing I did is I followed a palette, and so I was able to keep it to a few colors, and I think it looks really nice. I'm really proud of it, actually. And so what this got me excited for is maybe making an add-on that uses a node-based scripting language, especially since the developers are removing visual scripting from Godot in the future. And I really agree with their reasoning for it. The reasoning they gave was that visual scripting as it exists in Godot doesn't serve a very good purpose because it's effectively generating the same lines of code that you would if you were writing it. It's just more clicking with a mouse than typing on your keyboard. And it wasn't really helpful because Godot tries to be really general purpose. And a thing about game engines, and a philosophy that I really agree with, is that the game engine itself should be very general purpose, and then it's up to the users to develop specific tools for that engine that specifically help them with their projects. That way you're not trying to make one thing that works for everyone. You're trying to make enough that people can make their own thing that works for them. For example, if I want a platformer, but I really hate Coyote Time for some reason, if I make a whole system for making platformers that doesn't allow or doesn't easily implement Coyote Time, and someone else picks it up and is trying to add Coyote Time because they appreciate it, because of the kind of platformer they're making, then it's going to be a lot of work and a lot of hassle, and they might as well just make it from scratch. Having the game engine as a base, as a general purpose, highly usable base, really helps. So I think that's what I would do, is I would make a visual scripting system, but I would make it highly specific. Or rather, I'd make it able to take in like third-party node packs and allow developers to make their own nodes if they like. I'm not entirely sure how that would work, but I know for sure that that's how I would want to do it, because that way I can make the node system and it's something that the developers can use, but then for their own needs, if they're like, oh, well, I want this kind of functionality, they don't need to wait for me to make something that integrates with my add-on. If I design my add-on to let them do it, then it just works. that's one of the things that I really like about open source systems is anyone can improve it or they can make their own and make a modification. So I'm really hoping to make that add-on in the future here. I'm hoping to get more feedback on the systems I made for this game because I really tried to emulate the blueprints approach that Unreal Engine uses. I think it's a really, really good system for that. I was trying to imagine on my own what visual scripting would look like if the developers were trying to re-implement it. And I think definitely a more event-based system would make most sense. And from what I can tell on the Unreal documentation, that is exactly how Blueprints works. I've never personally used Blueprints, or Unreal Engine for that matter. I only recently had the computer strong enough to run it. I'm hoping to try it out. I'm hoping to figure out a good way to make a node system and to work out the weird bugs that were happening in here, as well as maybe include some fun elements to it, like the sound effects and the feedback that I had in my node system. I want to make it so that things can hook into that. So for the node graph editor, one of the cool things is one of the nodes that you can use in Godot is called a graph edit node. And it's a really good one. It's just this here. And it provides a lot of the frameworks for making a node-based system. It's the system that's used for the current visual scripting because this is 3.5 stable. And it's used for the visual shaders system. If you've used either of those before, this is basically what you're interacting with. I just added a theme to it to make it look integrated into the system. And if you can look here, there's a lot of different signals that it emits. So you can hook into as many of these as you like. Now, some of these I didn't implement. I could have implemented a few of these and made it more helpful, but I think I made enough for the functionality that I want. You can see the SFX hook-ins where all it's doing is just playing the sound effects. But most of them hook into this main script here, which basically just has all of the different things. So if we're connecting from an empty, you do this. If we're trying to connect, we connect. If we're trying to connect to an empty, we do that. All those fun things. And so a lot of what it does is we're hooking into an event bus. I want to talk about event buses in a tutorial at some point, but the basic rundown is that it has a bunch of signals and a bunch of functions that each emit the signal. And what you do is you add it to your auto load. That makes it accessible everywhere. So then the node graph editor can go into the event bus and say, oh, when there's a graph event, I want to listen to it. And so it goes to the event. And so the graph event gives an event name and it processes it. And so specifically what this does is it finds all of the event nodes that you've made and it processes them. It calls the tick function, which is how I process the nodes. And then I have an extra node graph log trigger, which pushes it to the log. That's something the log listens to. And it'll tell you, hey, we did not handle this event, which tells the player, hey, you should use this event. And so all the log needs to do is just listen to those events. And what's really cool is because we're using an event node to communicate, I can run this on its own. It doesn't have to really work. And actually, it saves and loads its own thing. So we're going to reset and save. And so we can make these and have that run. And if we run tick, it'll tell us that we didn't handle the tick event. And we can do that as well. But I wanted to tick and pause. And now it just ticks because it doesn't log the action move because I actually made it log it when Ava is performing it. And because Ava's not in the scene, they can't actually perform it. So the way that that works, and you'll get to see my shame, that they're just called target sprite, because I was testing and then just turned them into the final product. They just have to listen for that event. And so anything that pushes an Ava action will go to queue the event. And so it just pushes it. I use a stack system in this, which is a really interesting data type. I really enjoy using stacks. They're super useful for a ton of applications. And so then now, when Ava doesn't have a current action and there are actions still on the stack, Ava will grab the next available action and then perform it. And the perform action is just processing it. It tokenizes it is what it is. So they're space separated tokens. And so the first one will be one of the few commands, and then the remaining tokens will have the arguments, such as the relative position or the number of seconds to wait. And you can even see these on the main menu here. And what's fun is, because Ava is just listening to an event, I actually made an action randomizer, and all it does is just randomly push events through the event bus for Ava to perform. So as long as you're on the main menu, Ava will just perform these random actions from here. But in the main game, it's all coming from the node graph editor instead. And so the event bus is one really good way to decouple systems, because when it's decoupled, you can do cool things like this, where I have the Ava, the same one as in the levels, just sitting on the main menu, because I can control them using the event bus without needing to make a special graph system. Because before I implemented all of it, I was worried that I'd have to make a graph that would run and have to put the node graph system on the main menu and then hide it and force it to not be interactable. And that would be very gross and wouldn't really be very good code. If it works, it's okay for a game jam. But I had time and there was a better way to do it because I was already using an event bus. And so I just added it as one of the event bus things, is to trigger an Ava action. I also had to put a bunch of static bodies on the menu. I'm not super proud of that, but the way Ava moves is by using a raycast and determining if the position is able to be traversed. And I wanted Ava to be able to not traverse off screen, and so I put the boundaries for Ava to walk around in on screen. Overall, I'm pretty proud of this project. I'm hopeful that I'll get to make that add-on in the future. I'm hoping that it'll be worthwhile and useful to Godot developers. First and foremost, I probably want to make something useful to me. That way I'll be able to sustain passion for creating it. But I'll definitely be following good practices so that the node system itself can be expanded by other people, because I generally don't enjoy making 2D games. I enjoy playing 2D games, but I don't usually enjoy making them. I more so enjoy making 3D games, specifically first-person games. 3D first-person games require a very different architecture compared to 2D games, but if I can develop it in a way that's very decoupled, then I can swap out the 3D first-person logic for a 3D third-person, or an RTS style, or a 2D platformer, or whatever kind of game you want to make. But I believe the core framework structure that I would make would be focused on making a 3D first-person game. And I'd be especially at an advantage this way, because that's one of the things that Unity really not Unity, well, Unity does, but Unreal's blueprints are really helpful for first-person games. And from what I understand, Unreal is originally designed to be for first-person 3D games. And so if I look at their blueprint system as inspiration, I believe I'll be not too far off if I'm starting with a 3D first-person system, and then I can extrapolate it later into other things. So that's kind of my plans. I still have my other plans from a post I made recently, where I'm planning on making a game engine, and I'm planning on making some game development tools that would be this visual scripting system. Yeah, so we are going to do some fun stuff. One of the issues with my development, and one of the reasons I haven't been posting to my channel or doing my tutorials in a long while, is I don't have a job. I haven't had a job in almost a month now, and money's been getting pretty tight. So I'm trying to focus mostly on applying to jobs and trying to get a job, because if I have a job that pays me money, then I can do this in my free time, and I don't have to worry about whether or not we'll be in the same living place in a month. So yeah, really hopeful for some of the applications I've put in. I'm really hopeful. I'm not going to name any names for where I've applied because I don't want to make that a thing. If I do get hired, I'm not going to tell you where I get hired, probably. At least not for a long time, because I don't want to have any kinds of weird connections where if someone doesn't like me, they bring that to the company, or if they don't like the company, they bring that to me. I don't want that kind of interaction. So if I do get hired at a company, I might mention that I am hired at a game company or some other software development company, but I'm not going to tell you where. I don't know if that's kind of a parasocial thing with YouTube, but I personally don't want my private details so much out there. There are things that I share, like on Twitter and stuff, but there's certain details that I always omit because I don't want them to be shared. So there's that. I hope you have a lovely day. I had a great time making this, and I hope you enjoy the other stuff I make in the future. Hopefully in my free time with the job.